So, well, good for Vermont. I didn't know that. That will never happen in New Mexico, by the way, Mike. So New Mexico will never ban fracking. It just, politically speaking, it's impossible. It will never happen. And so that's why we kind of come at it from other angles of how do we help protect public safety in water and air. And I'm not saying yay or nay. I'm just saying is a pragmatic political reality that will never, ever happen in New Mexico. But there's other things that we can do to kind of nibble and protect people, and I think those are all doable.
Is that because of revenue?
A lot of it is because of state revenue, although the revenue of oil and gas in New Mexico is exaggerated, but it is very significant. Part of it is jobs. And lots of people work in the industry, and just like you don't want the film business to be killed by the state, people don't want the oil and gas industry to be killed by the state. There are ways to do a lot of these things that are responsible and that are okay, and then there's ways that aren't. And so the game is, how do we, everybody here drives, and until we move to solar-powered panels in batteries in our car, there's got to be some continued production. And that's just how it is. Natural gas can be, if it's done responsibly, I think natural gas could be a great bridge fuel away from dirty coal and oil as we move towards truly renewable solar and wind and other things. And New Mexico is rich in natural gas, and there's a lot of places you can do it where you don't have to do these aquifer natural gas formation interminglings. So you got very deep gas, and so it's more possible to do that.
Where's the water come from for that?
For what?
For fracking, since it costs millions of gallons to frack a well.
If you recirculate, the amount of water that you need is cut by 90%. So that was another bill that I had to require closed-loop systems on all these things, which is part of the pit rule. And so when you have closed-loop systems, the amount of water that you need is reduced. But it does demand water. You're absolutely right. I mean, there's cost to everything. Everything that we do, there's costs and benefits, and you've got to figure out how to balance, you make sure that the operators are paying for the externalities of their business and are really paying the true costs associated with what they're doing. But there's also benefits, so there are pluses and minuses. It's a great way for a lot of people to affordably heat their home. They use propane and natural gas, and so there's benefits and costs all the way up along. But part of it too is just political influence. The oil and gas industry and the lobbyists make huge contributions, and you're seeing right now. So the governor's super PAC, Reform New Mexico Now, raised $200,000 in an afternoon from 2 oil companies in Artesia. And then they use that to go around and kick all of our folks in the teeth, and so it's a bunch of money. And even though my view is that the oil and gas industry is politically inept, when you actually look at what they do and what they spend their money on, and then you compare that to the results that they achieve, they do a terrible job. But they've got everybody in the legislature, except for a few of us, completely terrified of them because they don't want to face this big oil money. Well, the big oil money actually doesn't win races, really. But everyone is afraid of it, and so that is another thing, too. You'll get even progressive members of the legislature from Albuquerque, and I'll go up to them and say, hey, look, this is a good surface owner protection. I don't know if anyone remembers the surface owner bill I did my first session, right? And they're like, oh, man, this is oil. I can't do this. And I'm going, man, you're supposed to be here for people, right? And help folks. You're like, yeah, but talk to me later if it passes committee or something, right? And that's kind of where it's at. All right, how are we doing on time? Do you want to do one more, 2 more? It's 5 after.
We can go to about 12:15.
All right, so maybe 1 or 2 more. Yeah.
Could you comment on the implications of the National Defense Authorization Act?
Great.
I know it's a national issue more, but it's also every citizen's issue. Are you familiar with that at all?
I cannot quote you, statutory language from it, but I'm generally familiar with the objections to it. I don't know, though, that there's been any. I know that it was in the bill. Has there actually been any on-the-ground consequences from it? Has it started? Have people been affected?
We don't know what the question.
It authorizes the National Defense Authorization Act authorizes the president and the agencies under him to arrest and detain and disappear any person that they deem necessary in their quote-unquote fight of terrorism. And it gives the government authority to do what I just said, and I'm really concerned about that, and I just don't know the details of how it's being implemented.
Yeah, I don't know in terms of practical implications if that's happened. I mean, but if it is happening, maybe we just wouldn't know, right? Because people would be vanishing. But my sense is that it is. I mean, it's clearly unconstitutional. I mean, there's just no way. I mean, you saw it with the Jose Padilla case when he was arrested in Chicago. You can't have U.S. citizens arrested and detained indefinitely. You've got to have hearings. You have to be tried in civilian court. I mean, there's in the National Defense Authorization Act cannot override the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution and your right to petition for habeas corpus. I mean, I just don't know how it would be legal. I think it's crazy that they put it in there, these broad, sweeping provisions. But I mean, it's hard to say. I just don't know what's actually happening with it. It's a politically very cynical thing that was done, right? Because a lot of people like me would not have wanted to vote for that language in there. But you're heading into a huge national election, and no one wants to be accused of voting against money for our troops who are overseas, right? I mean, the worst thing that can happen for someone running for Congress, right, is this guy voted against armor for our troops. This guy voted against the bullets that they need. This guy voted. I mean, come on, what, right? So it's a terrible choice, and the president said he dealt with it with a signing statement, which is like George Bush all over again. So I don't know. But, I mean, it's hard for me to say because I just don't know the specifics of how it's actually been dealt with.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Could you comment on the driver's license issue and the related issue of voter ID?
Driver's licenses and voter ID. Happy to. So it's kind of hard to know where to start. But the governor has made it, I think, probably her main political goal to end the practice of issuing driver's licenses to people who do not have valid Social Security numbers. That's what it is. It's sometimes immigrants, sometimes not, but basically what it is the law now, you don't have to have a valid Social Security number to get a driver's license. And most people who are not legally in the country don't have valid Social Security numbers. So that's how it's become this issue of immigrant driver's licenses. That became the law under Bill Richardson, and the goals at the time were, let's make sure everybody driving has a license, and it should reduce insurance rates and make the roads safer. The police at the time said we would much rather have people that we pull over have a photo ID so we know who they are and where they live, and people generally feel more comfortable calling the police to ask for assistance if they have an ID than if they don't. And so the police, the law enforcement, there were at least two reasons that they wanted it there. Additional law enforcement reason, we've added now about 90,000 names to the National Criminal Information Database, which is helpful if you need to track somebody down. It also allows you to establish criminal history on people. So as we track DWIs, you know that if you have this person with the same driver's license, you know if it's their second or third or fourth time being pulled over for a DWI. During the last two sessions that we've been dealing with this, I've had both times two different uniformed members of the state police come to my office, ask for me not to share their names, close the door, and then say, please don't change it because it's better for us and it's better for our colleagues to have people driving and have licenses. There are big problems, though, with the program. Like you see these people that are coming in from Chicago, right, and they have, they send home 200 licenses, right, on the basis of a fraudulent affidavit or a fraudulent utility bill, or they get it and they live there for a week and then they leave New Mexico, cancel their car insurance, and they're never to be seen from again. Big problem. So we had a compromise, and this was an agreed upon compromise, Republicans and Democrats, and this was going to be the law until the governor pulled the plug on it, and it was this. If you don't have a Social Security number when you apply, you get a 2-year license instead of an 8-year license. That's one. 2, you have to have address verification 6 months after you get your license, and you have to have 6 months of residency established before. So not just one bill, but you have to have 6 utility bills in your name, or 6 bank statements or something showing that you've been at this address for 6 months. And then we have the ability to go and check 6 months later to make sure that you're still there. And we were going to ask for a fingerprint and that could have either been the digital fingerprint if you're coming from Mexico and you have a matricula, which is their license, they have a biometric fingerprint on there, or you can give a new one when you sign up, and there were other fraud restricting measures, but those are the ones that immediately come to mind. That would have done a lot to deal with the things that we've been reading about in the newspaper, right? Because you couldn't show up from Chicago and get your license and go home the next day because you don't have 6 utility bills in your name from Albuquerque. There were also, this is another thing that we had, which is there would be electronic verification with the utility company or with other government agencies to verify that this is in fact a valid utility bill, so you wouldn't have a fake utility bill. And it's already set up so that if you apply for one of these licenses, you have to have a face-to-face interview anyway. So there'd be more opportunity to verify that these are all correct. So licenses still get sent out. People are still driving licensed, but we're able to crack down on the fraud and abuse of the program. And I thought that was a fair thing to do. And for me, the moment that this debate crystallized, because I got an overwhelming amount of contact from constituents saying, please don't take the licenses away. Overwhelming. And so I felt like, okay, well, I'm doing it for my folks, but I was like, God, this just doesn't seem necessarily fair or right or something. That you're not in the country legally and you're getting a license, but, that's what my constituents want, so I'm going to do that. But there was a moment where it completely crystallized for me, and we had Demesia Padilla. She's the Secretary of the Tax Department. She was in the Judiciary Committee testifying in support of the governor's proposal. And a woman stood up in the audience, and she goes to UNM. She's not legally in the country. And she has a daughter who's a U.S. citizen, who's 2. And so this student uses the driver's license to drive her child to daycare and then go to classes at UNM and then pick the child up, and has a driver's license that she can go to the drugstore and get a prescription and do these other things. And so I asked and it was a moving story. Here's someone who's doing all the, who's trying to do right by her daughter. And so I asked the cabinet secretary, how does taking away the license from the mom improve the life of the U.S. citizen who's 2 years old? How does it make her life better? Because that's what we're there for in the legislature, right? We're there to make the lives of our citizens better. How does it help that 2-year-old to have their mom's driver's license taken away? And when I asked her that, she looked at me and she goes, well, that little girl will grow up knowing that when she turns 16, she can get a driver's license that has integrity behind it. Something like that. And I said, great, okay, but that's 14 years from now. How does it make her life better tomorrow if her mom can't take her to the doctor, or if her mom can't drive her to daycare? I mean, how does it actually, and I said, this little girl, she's only 2, but she's a citizen, right? We're supposed to be looking out for her. How do we help her? And again, no answer. And so that was the moment when I just thought, I can't think of a really good reason to yank them. I can think of good reasons to make sure that they're being done appropriately so that the right people have them. And that's what we've been fighting for all along. Because it's not, the fraud and abuse is not right, it's not fair, but look, it's just a driver's license. And if you change it to 2 years, it really fixes a lot of the other problems too. And we were talking about maybe doing a 1-year license. You have to go in every year and renew it. Those sorts of things seem completely reasonable to me. And it seemed reasonable to a lot of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle until the politics got back into it. Now, for voter ID, voting is a First Amendment right. For the lawyers in the room, it's a fundamental right. It is something that the state, and whether it's the state or the national, no government in the United States can infringe upon a fundamental right without showing a compelling state interest. Okay, so you can't restrict somebody's speech unless you have a gosh darn good reason to do it. You can't infringe on somebody's right to go to church unless you've got a hell of a good reason to do it. Okay, I don't need a license to speak. Okay, I don't need a license to go to church. I don't need a license to vote. That's kind of one way that I have of looking at it. When you look in Pennsylvania, the way that they put this law in place, it disenfranchises hundreds of thousands of people. And there was a story on the radio. Everyone's heard about the one plaintiff. There's the named plaintiff in the lawsuit in Pennsylvania. I think what is she, like 85? She's a black woman that would go down to Selma during the civil rights era and march, and she's voted in every election in her life, and she's got the voter rolls to prove. I mean, she's voted like school bond, everything, like every single thing. Well, she's so old that she doesn't have a birth certificate issued by the state, and the church that gave, that put out the records is gone, and the family Bible can't be found. She can't prove that she was born in this country. And there's literally no way for her to vote. Now, that's an extreme case, but think about the Navajo Nation. Okay, so you got all these people up there that don't have driver's licenses, and for you to drive from the middle of the Navajo Nation to the nearest office is in Farmington. So, right, so you got to drive 2.5 hours, find somebody with a car, drive 2.5 hours. Hopefully they're open that day. You get your driver's license if you have the right stuff, and then you get to go back and then you vote. Well, yeah, it's not a poll tax, but it's expensive to go, and you got to pay $10 for your ID card and all this stuff. If there was evidence, and so this is when it gets back to the compelling state interest part. If there was actually evidence of people voting in any kind of significant numbers to make me think that the integrity of the election was in jeopardy, I would say sure, right? Let's make sure that we have some form of ID so that we're certain that there's not a bunch of fraud. But the Bush administration's Justice Department, I don't know the numbers, but it was something like, what was it, over 6 years, they found like 30 cases of a fraudulently cast ballot in the entire country over some period.
80 million votes.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, and there was, they found here, there were, I think, 8 people. Okay, I know I'm being recorded. I don't know the numbers, so I'll just say, like, off the bat, I do not know the exact numbers, but it's something like they found 20 people who had registered to vote because they had a green card, and then one guy cast a ballot and called the Secretary of State, called Ken Ortiz, the Secretary of State's office, and said, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, I didn't know, and I really didn't mean to, and please, I don't want to get in trouble." So it's like one vote, right? Well, okay, yeah, it means it offsets somebody else's vote, and that's not good. But does it rise to the level of making everybody have to get a special license to vote? No. I mean, it's just you got to balance the interest there, and it's not good, but it's not bad enough for that. So show me the evidence. And when a great moment. This is the last thought. So I know I'm taking too long here, but Diane Hamilton is a state representative from Silver City. And it was like the Eugene McCarthy, or not Eugene. It was like the McCarthy moment. Joe McCarthy, sorry. Like Joseph McCarthy. She stood up. She goes, "I have a list." I swear to God, she does this. "I have a list of 78 illegal immigrants and dead people registered to vote today in Doña Ana County." And so, sure enough, the Doña Ana County clerk got the list and went through. And every single one was wrong. Like, this person was not an illegal immigrant. This person was, their address was different, but their middle initial was the same. I mean, it's like all these things where it took about an hour. She went through, and turns out it's all fine, and it's okay. And look, they know that if the guys on the other side know that if they restrict the votes so that it's harder for poor people and people of color to vote, then they win more often. Okay, in close elections, restricting the vote, if you can take off 2% of the vote, the other guys win, and they know that. They were doing that in redistricting here in New Mexico, the way they were drawing these districts. I mean, the stories from that, when I was a lead plaintiff in redistricting, so I saw all this stuff, that what they were doing was incredible, and it is an absolute national coordinated effort on the right to restrict voting so that they win more and we lose more, and that people of color and who are poor don't get to vote as much, and that's obscene. So I just can't. I shouldn't say any more on that. But are we done? Should we finish?
Related, the real ID photo thing.
Oh yeah, the real ID. Don't worry about that. They're going to do a waiver. It's going to be fine. They've done a waiver every year. There's 14 other states in the country that have already passed laws prohibiting them from complying with real ID. So they're not going to throw 15 states and say that no one with a license from New Mexico can get on an airplane. So don't worry about that. It'll be just fine, but they'll do it after the election. All right, thanks, everybody. Thanks.